All right, so through all of this, I've had to fight racism, sexism, bias against the homeless and against the poor, bias against groups that I'm not even a part of, but people assume that I am, or were lied to. The police did a lot of bad stuff. They're not willing to actually investigate anything, not when it comes to me. I mean, hell, the closest that I got was, well, the sheriff here in this town went down and talked to Laura Nelson, asked her a bunch of leading questions. Didn't ask about the wrongdoing of his officers or the situations at hand. What he was looking for in specific was information that he could use to manipulate the situation so that I was not heard. He only wanted the stuff from Laura Nelson that he could use to try to make me look crazy. It's not okay. And then we got Officer Hahn, or Deputy Hahn. I talked to him yesterday. And Amy Spencer, who stole my things. Now, those of you who got to see the messages between Amy Spencer and I, well, what she had to say in front of the cops was a completely different story. She wants to just lay this all to rest. I'm not going to. I'm not going to. What she did was horrible. What her kids did was horrible. What Rihanna did was horrible. What her boyfriend did was horrible. And what these officers did was horrible, and it needs to come out. Second of all, Deputy Hahn should no longer be a police officer. If any agency at all made any effort to do their jobs, I would never have had to break the law to defend myself or to defend my loved ones, which is what this all comes down to. Even the ones who are mad at me, I still love them. I still love Jamie. I still love Alicia. I still love Teresa Orn. I still love my little sister and my older brother. I still love all of these people. When it comes to police corruption in America, these police not only have the power to harm you, but also to prevent you from being able to defend yourself anywhere, to prevent you from being able to show evidence in a court of law. They can do things to you like charge you with assault when they assaulted you. And although even if you win, you still have to get that pulled away from your arrest record. That arrest record is always there. And it guarantees that the police who see you after that are not going to take you seriously, and they are probably going to bully you. My only saving grace through the last few weeks, well, through the last few months, is that there have been people here in most of the places that I go to prevent cops from doing the things that they've been doing. After what the Deuel County Sheriff's Department here did, I never should have had to go back to them. They should have done their job to begin with. Like Deputy Holloway said, human nature. You know what he was talking about? He was talking about law enforcement doing their jobs. And how if they're not made to do their jobs, they're not going to. It's just human nature. Same thing with public pretenders. They're not getting paid $1 billion for that. They're not the ones who have to sit out the time. They're not the ones whose lives are ruined. So they don't care if they win or lose. They get paid either way. The police took advantage of my poverty and my disabilities both physical and mental, as well as my disabilities technologically and financially, and they exploited those to their fullest to prevent me from being able to defend myself or show evidence in court, to prevent me from being able to take care of myself or put myself in a position of safety. Hello, Pam. Even here, I have to look over my shoulder because it's the same cops. And the officers, instead of listening to me, they'll listen for a little bit and then they start making excuses for the other officers. Hey, shut up. You need to shut up, cop. You need to listen to what it is that I am telling you instead of making excuses as if you were there because you weren't. You are making excuses for the wrongdoing of other officers before you even heard what I have to say. Repeatedly. I've spoken to the cops already 4 times this week. 4 times. Now, part of the stuff that I've had to deal with is being able to record it. My phone is again too full of evidence to make a long recording. But when I went up there yesterday, I pressed the record button. It didn't have very long on it. It pretty much immediately turned it off because there was no room to record. But I was going to record that whole situation with Deputy Hahn and with Amy. And I asked him repeatedly if he had his body camera on. But the other thing is that I didn't get to record it because there was no room because my phone is full of so much evidence. I need help to show that. I need help to get a lawyer. People telling me to do things that I don't have the money to do, don't have the ability to do. That doesn't make it so that I'm not trying. So many people have treated me like I'm not trying after I did nothing but try. And they didn't see all of the effort that I made, so I must not have made it. Meanwhile, I got proof that I did. And I don't want to post all this stuff all over YouTube and all over Facebook. This should have been to the cops and to the courts. That's where it should have gone. Then I have to deal with a lot of issues like many of my witnesses are friends with my predators, like Chelsea Worsing. She's a key witness. She's friends with Maddie Boa. She's friends with Katie Whiteman, 2 of my predators. And then we've got Pamela Carty, who is friends with several other public pretenders that I had elsewhere. She's friends with them. Friends with them. Friends with people that I was trying to take to court. Just because you prevent someone from being able to take someone to court doesn't mean they didn't have a legitimate fucking problem to begin with. The abuse that I had to endure over lies and slander by the Bollinger family in 2016 and 2017, it was at the point where police needed to be involved. Not one-sided like they were, but look at both sides. I needed help getting a lawyer. I could not take care of myself because of what these predators had done. And the police, rather than helping me out, exploited the fact that I'm disabled. Whenever I tried to turn in police for their wrongdoing and turn in these other predators, I was told either A, out of their jurisdiction, even if it was in their jurisdiction, or B, they would send me to a nuthatch or lock me up in jail. That's how I got treated for trying to turn in police. That's how I got treated for trying to turn in child molesters. Imagine being punished for trying to turn in child molesters. I want you to understand something. There are well over a dozen bodies, almost 2 dozen bodies, that I have had to deal with in the last 3 years. that I've personally had to deal with. Dead people that I had to deal with. I want to explain some of those dead people to you. Let's start off with Benji. Right before Natalie was killed, mind you, there was a lot of deaths that year and a lot the year before. That happens when you know a lot of people, especially street people. They expire quickly. They die of stuff you didn't think people died of anymore, like exposure to the elements. I made a post right before Natalie was killed. I made a post about how somebody that I know was probably going to die the next day. They were probably going to freeze to death without a blanket. And sure enough, Benjamin Harvey froze to death outside of the Boulder Museum of Natural History on Steve campus without a blanket. I knew Benji. That's how Mariah Johnson and I became friends. Then, 2 days later, 3 days later, I'm sorry, Natalie Bollinger got shot in the head. And a lot of people chose to do a lot of harmful things to me, including a great many police officers, a lot of law enforcement, a lot of the public, and the media egged it on. The Bollingers egged it on. Natalie's actual predators egged it on. Why wouldn't they? It takes the eyes off of them. Matter of fact, one of those officers, Detective Peterson of Adams County, him and Jai Rogers got a hold of me when they caught Joseph Michael Lopez. He's the guy that killed Natalie. They called me up when they caught him and they told me, "Thank you for keeping the armchair detectives busy." Yes, they actually thanked me. But that's not all. There were people like Anna Hunka. She was living with a guy who'd threatened to kill her before. And he said that he'd just hit her in the head with something or smash her head off the sink and say that she had a seizure. You know, she died of a seizure. Chelsea Worthing being friends with some of my predators. A lot of these people are friends with my predators. Joanna Taylor Smith, who I went to for help, is friends with my predators, many of them. Brian Townsend, who I went to for help, is friends with many of my predators. Tabitha Michelle Cook is friends with many of my predators. These are the people that I had to go to for help. The police did a lot of illegal stuff in order to try to cover their wrongdoing after Natalie was dead. Before Natalie was dead, they're like, "Oh, he's mentally retarded. We don't care about him unless somebody comes in with him." And that literally is how it is with law enforcement. You look like this, and you do need somebody to go in with you. Otherwise, human nature, they're just not going to do their fucking jobs. When law enforcement here realized that Natalie Bollinger was dead, they started doing everything they could from the very beginning to cover up their wrongdoing. Good cereal. It's Frosted Mini Spooners. So, having to go to law enforcement that had done me wrong, not being allowed to show evidence anywhere, and I have all sorts of proof, and I have posted proof all over YouTube here. They wouldn't allow me to show evidence in court. Everything that was done to prevent me from having access to resources while they pretend I have access to those resources. They even say in court and on their paperwork that I had access to these resources that they took away from me. Sorry, I got some of that stuck between my gums and my lip. Public pretenders aren't going to do their jobs. Every single one of these places that I went to, I felt as if I should have been recording it. And in a lot of those places, I couldn't. A lot of those places, I was trying to show those officers evidence that was on my phone, or the FBI or the Secret Service. Treat me like crazy, like I'm crazy because I said I talked to the Secret Service, because I said I talked to the FBI. Well, I'd been trying. They didn't care. I literally threatened the President of the United States to try to force an outside agency to get involved to take a look. I shouldn't have had to do that. I shouldn't have had to do that. You guys want to make all sorts of excuses why I should have done other stuff, other things that I did not have the ability to do. But you think that if you punish me enough for not being able to do those things, that it'll magic me up the ability to do those things. If you expect somebody in a wheelchair to do the high jump, you got some major issues. That is an issue with your head. That's not their fault, but it is their problem. You say, hey, you know what other people think of you isn't your problem, Sean. No, when people are assaulting me, that is my problem. When people are threatening my life and my loved ones' lives, that is my problem. When people are harming me and my loved ones, that is my problem. When my human rights, civil rights, and constitutional rights are violated, that is my problem. These things happened because of what people thought, because of their assumptions. I was not judged based on facts. I was judged based on assumptions. Bad assumptions from people who had done wrong previously in many of these cases. People with a history of doing me wrong personally. And I have to go to these people for help. That is a major conflict of interest. Having lawyers that don't show up to court repeatedly so often that you are trying to get a different lawyer and the judge won't let you. I tried to fire Pamela Cardi for the stuff that she was pulling. The judge would not allow me. After I threatened to sue Pamela Cardi, it was a conflict of interest for her to have any more dealings with me. I threatened to sue her and her boss. And I was trying to, and she knew it. She did everything in her power to try to make it seem as if she had done her job until I was transferred to another jail because she had lied to me. She did everything in her power to try to make it look like for the courts that she had done her job. Except it shows on those court documents that she didn't show up for court dates. And the things that she told me and the things that she spoke about in court, she knew not to be true. She was able to manipulate the system to harm me because I threatened to sue her. Same thing with Zoe Tanner and Stephanie Cotton. and Catherine Hay, at least one of which is friends with Pamela Carty. Same thing with Amanda Balehash, another friend of Pamela Carty. A lot of people are mad at me for things that I literally had to do. You say, oh, Sean, you always have a choice. You always have a choice. I don't have your choices. And that's the thing that you're not getting when you're making these suggestions. You can have all the good suggestions in the world, and you might be able to do those things. But if I don't have the ability to do those things, that advice doesn't help me. If you don't know the situation, then you're not going to give good advice because your advice is not based on the situation. It's just pretty words. It's not actually advice. I say I need a lawyer. Telling me to love myself doesn't get me a lawyer. Telling me a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush doesn't get me a lawyer. Telling me to just let it go doesn't get me a lawyer. I cannot let it go. These things are looming over my head, okay? That's not something that I can let go. These things prevent me from a great many opportunities. And even worse, these things prevent me from being able to see my loved ones. They prevent me from going to the positive places where I am happy. Tell the courts to let it go. But at this point, it's not something that can just be let go. I will be abused for the rest of my life over this slander unless I am allowed to defend myself in court, unless I am allowed to show evidence in court, unless I am actually allowed to face my accusers. If you go in and turn in a bad officer and you're assaulted by an officer that you had already tried to turn in and were illegally prevented from turning in, that's a major problem. Officer Burke getting to assault me in a Longmont hospital after what he did as an officer in Broomfield. No, he shouldn't have been an officer after that. He sure as hell should not have been allowed to assault me. After what happened with Natalie and after what those officers in Broomfield did, after illegally preventing me from filing reports against them and the volunteers, actively breaking the law to prevent me from showing evidence repeatedly, actively doing so, and destroying evidence and theft of evidence. There are pictures of Natalie. Those were my pictures that were stolen. Who are they stolen by? Officer Brian Valenzuela. I tried to turn in all of these officers in all of these situations, but their websites make it impossible. When I try to send it over the internet, I get all sorts of excuses. Oh, I can't see it. So I send those things to somebody else who's not an officer. Can you see that? Oh, yeah, I can see those just fine. Then the officer is pulling some fucked up shit. That officer is doing something messed up to try to get me there in person so that he can victimize me. And that's why I needed somebody there with me, is to prevent me from being victimized. I never had that. Now, I did have people that went along with me and did partially prevent me from getting victimized. They were witnesses to the fact that I was telling the truth. but getting somebody to listen to them. We don't even know who to talk to about that. And that is the biggest issue. Hundreds upon hundreds of hundreds. And out of all these phone calls, I still don't have the legal representation that I need. I still don't have a lawyer. I still have to endure this abuse. I have to break the law to try to force the courts to look at the abuse that I have endured. Sheriff Scott DaCosta, I 100% want him in prison. I want Cody Selhorst in prison. I want Officer Hahn in prison. I want Officer Michael Beard in prison and Officer Waylon Lolatai in prison. I want Alicia Bollinger in prison. I don't think I have enough on Rose Kelly to put her in prison, but I certainly have enough to put Danica Garner in prison and to put Shelley Campbell in prison and to put Kara Johnson in prison. The problem is because I'm not able to take care of myself, that it's okay for these people to do these things. Because you don't want to understand, because you don't want to hear what's happening. You just want me to take it. That's not acceptable. This is about systemic abuse over lies and slander. Abuse by the police, by the courts, by the Bollinger family, by known criminals and drug dealers and drug users and abusers, by child abusers and alcoholics. It's about sexism. It's about racism. It's about nationalism. It's about so many different prejudice and bias that the American people hold. These people did terrible things to me. And when I did things out of desperation and frustration because I needed help, they said, see, he's a terrible person. See what he did? He's a terrible person. I did the things that I did to try to force law enforcement to look at the things that were being done to me. I was trying to get help every step of the way and hitting roadblock after roadblock after roadblock and getting treated like I'm not trying because nothing good was happening, because these people weren't helping how you say that they do. Why don't you just go to the cops? I did. Why don't you go to the state patrol? I did. They're not willing to investigate because of the term mentally ill and because of what's on my arrest record that I was never allowed to defend myself against. They dropped the charges against me for being assaulted by Waylon Lolatai. I want you to get that through your thick fucking skull. This guy was let go in Denver before he assaulted me. He was let go as an officer in Denver because he assaulted someone. And then he assaulted me, and they all refused to give me his name. And because of that, he was able to harm 6 other people after me. This is a serial situation. He might be a serial killer. The way that he hates the homeless people, the way that he treats the homeless people. We're not human beings to him. You want to complain about how black people were treated 200 years ago? The homeless are still treated that way today at a much higher rate than all other minority groups combined. The homeless are victimized. There are more hate crimes against the homeless than all other hate crimes combined times 5. And that's not including police interaction. Over 80% of our homeless people, or of our inmate population nationwide, are homeless people. Therefore, petty offenses or offenses that did not happen, they just weren't allowed an honest day in court because there was nobody there on their behalf. There was no family there in their corner. There was no actual lawyer there in their corner. And the judge knew this, and the police knew this, and the public pretender knew this, and the DA knew this. They just wanted to get you off of their desk. They don't care. They're not the ones sitting the time out. They're not the ones being victimized because of their bad decisions. Again, I say, fuck this goddamn country.